Alrighty, I will call tonight's meeting of the Beaver Boardwalk Community Oversight Committee to order. First item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda from the committee? None. Administration, any changes?
No.
No. Okay, so we need a motion to adopt them.
I'll move to adopt.
Okay. A motion to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So that takes us to item 2.0, adoption of meeting minutes. 2.1, PDOC meeting minutes from August 10th, 2023. Are there any comments or questions about the minutes? If there's no comments or questions, we need a motion to adopt those as well.
I'll make it. Motion to adopt. I don't remember. I just do them all.
All right, motion to adopt the meeting minutes for August 10th, 2023 on the table. All those in favor? Okay, that's also carried unanimously. Brings us to our first information item for the evening, 3.1 RFP update.
Okay. So the RFP will close on October 30th, and we had our site visit today. It was optional for contractors because we've had, a couple of contractors come for various projects out there. So we did have 3 on site today. Questions are due to me next week. So we will fill them in with any of the questions that they have, but the environmental consultants were also there today. Largely that they just kind of had questions around the Water Act and our approval and how strict is it and what does this section mean? So that's really why it was so important to have our environmental folks there today. And then they're ready to support the town as we go through like the question processes and doing any addendums to the RFP. And we're excited.
How much money did we get out of FRIA for all this?
So at this time, they, like I said in the email previously, so we still don't have our answer back. We've been in conversation with West Fraser, and they're in support of the project. So at this point, we don't know the total amount, but we did an RFP as opposed to a tender because that does not lock us in. Where a tender can do that, it starts triggering contract law and things like that. So that's why we went this route. Yeah.
So I'd follow up then, so in the event that there is no FRIA funding and no other funding available to be able to do the project, it can be canceled.
It can be canceled, it can be paused, pending other grants and things like that.
I don't know if we're allowed to ask, but I'll ask. Were any of them local? Were some of them local?
The ones that were on site today were not local, but we did see ones that we've seen before that did the approaches. They were there today. Yeah. Others, like I said, may be interested, but they've already been here before, so they didn't feel a need to potentially come. Yeah.
Just letting you know that we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, Bill,
Hello, barely made it, but I made it.
no problem. Doug?
Kind of answered a couple of my questions I had there with the RFP structure. That's good to know. One of the learnings from an earlier project about a year ago was the scope of it, especially as this one might be a bit larger. It's quite a bit more than what has been done previously. So are you limiting it to just folks that can do everything like piling and decking and environmental considerations? Or are you potentially partitioning it out a little bit for some bidders who may only be interested in piling and some only interested in decking?
Yeah, so it's a little of column A and a little of column B. So we talked with respect to the environmental, the town is going to hold the contract with that because then that allows us to kind of drive their work and keep the costs down, right? So on that piece, they're staying with us and we've told the contractors who they have to work with, which is our associated engineering folks. The RFP itself is drafted in such a way that we wanted really to allow contractors to tell us what they were able to provide, right? So if one puts in for just decking and one puts in for, well, we can provide these piles and they're significantly better because of X, Y, Z. The RFP process does allow us the opportunity to negotiate on how the actual scope comes together at the end and how that work is executed.
Thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions of the RFP?
Maybe I have one, which is, so you said that it's open for a little while. What is kind of your timeline for collecting results, making a decision? I assume kicking it up to the appropriate decision-making channels to review and approve?
So like I said, it closes on the 30th of October. And then it usually takes 10 days for us to kind of sit with the selection committee, review everything, and then put that in for like select the appropriate or the winner, right? And from that point, there's 10 more days per the contract to enter into a contract with the successful bidder. So approximately 20 days after at the longest after the 30th.
Okay, and then the source of funding would be kind of in there somewhere where that is locked down and confirmed and that sort of stuff.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
It might have been covered in other meetings, but what actually is the RFP for? Like all of it? Like
All of the
things like
sections that we sat and we had the chart with and highlighted all those sections that we went through, those are all getting repaired. So it's pretty much everything except for the tower and then the section towards Fairfax and Reimer that is sunken. Those are the ones that we're thinking are going to be potentially challenging. So we're working with the environmental folks to figure out if we can squeeze it in with our maintenance or if that section in particular will potentially require an amendment. But again, when we have these contractors that, they see what kind of the rules are environmentally, we're excited to see what they might propose to us in terms of how they want to deal with that. And then being able to use that to negotiate with Alberta Environment as well as our environmental folks will be helpful.
I didn't bring my map, but the part by Fairfax, Reimer, that's sunken, that's not like there's that's the south side from the water deck toward the toward the access to Reimer Drive. And part of that is sunken. It's not that. It's
Not that,
just
the one that's
around to
completely
the tower.
submerged.
The tower.
Yeah.
corner.
Oh, yeah.
So just to be clear, sorry, then that's the piece that kind of loops around the end of the lake right by the tower.
Yeah.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Doug and then Bill.
So it sounds like everything is kind of rolling here throughout November. Are you targeting for construction to happen in kind of 2024, the last little bit of winter, provided the funding does work out as intended?
Yeah, so the RFP is written to state that it has to be frozen conditions, right? So they're gonna give us in their proposal, they'll give us a proposed start date, which is usually around December 15th is when we've been able to get in there in the past. However, we've also seen where we haven't had enough freeze up at that point, and it kind of just leads into the next winter season. So that's part of the contract negotiations that will occur. However, we did stipulate that the successful proponent can only charge for mobilization and demobilization once, right? So because of the weather, if that stalls them up, right, and they have to wait until the next winter to finish up or to get in there at all, they're not double charging us for that. So we are targeting this winter, December, but it's weather dependent.
Well, it's a fair amount of work. I'd be interested to see if someone could achieve it in a single season. Not to mention, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the source of funding when you have the full sticker price in front of them to see what happens.
Bill.
Doug answered my question. I was wondering about the winter. It has to be done in the winter, so he answered my question. It's fine.
Okay. So.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, It does seem like a lot of work for one winter, but that's how it's written up.
Oh, no, sorry, to be
Yeah.
clear, no, we gave them 2 winters,
2 winters.
2 total winters, but I'm. Like, if they can complete it all in a winter, great, right, because we
Mhm.
wanted them to impact the wetland as little as possible,
Right.
but it's really gonna depend on the weather. And then there might be some tricky sections, right, that they wanna leave until the end and come back at it the next winter, but we'll see that when their proposals start coming in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you might, once you get building, you might discover something else, so you have to do.
I don't think we'll come across like those kinds of surprises, other than like maybe a broken pile or those kinds of things if they hit rock. But more like, you know, it's too frozen in the wood, like in that section by the tower, right? If it's frozen, how are we getting it out of there in frozen conditions, right?
Right,
That I think is gonna be the trickiest part, which is why I think an amendment might be necessary to the plan. Cause I just can't think of a way that you get that out there in the winter.
oh, just excavating the whole thing, like, and what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I haven't read the RFP. Is it designed or written to be in a phased approach?
We give them that option, yeah, so they have the option to phase it over 2 winters, or propose something different.
I meant like an area, like this area is priority 1.
Yep, so we've provided them the priority document, right, so they know which areas are the priority for the community, right? But of course, when they go to do that work, some of those things may not make sense to attack something that's a high priority for us if they just have to bulldoze over it to get to the next section.
Okay.
Right, so they know which areas should be addressed or are the highest priority. How they plan to achieve that work will be seen when they hand in their proposals.
Thanks.
Or that last comment there is gonna trigger the thought, which would be, so you got 2 seasons of construction, you kind of, it is a little open-ended as how they want to attack it. Are we leaving it open-ended for them to demo a section this winter and leave it demoed throughout the summer and then finish next winter? Or are we being a little bit more prescriptive on what has to be started and finished before summer tourism picks back up?
We don't anticipate, or we're not willing to accept anything that would have a closure. To like, let's say that through section, right, like any of the closed sections, if those need to remain closed, right, or they want to tackle them last. But unless they run into a reason for having to not complete something, we wouldn't accept something that their plan is to not achieve that and leave a big gap where you can't even use it.
Okay.
Sorry, and the RFP is on the town website.
Yes.
I have a question, if there's no one else in queue, how is the question of unknown amount of funding dealt with in the RFP?
We put in a clause letting them know that, you know, we're, it's grant funded, right? That we're hoping it's grant funded, and then we put in the clause that says the town reserves the right to not proceed with this project because of, you know, if we don't have money, we're not moving forward with it.
So sorry to be more clear, what if there's partial funding available? Does that allow portions of the highest priority portions of the work to be completed and the lower priority portions that this group developed are left to a later date, or how's that done?
Correct, so if, let's say the proposals come in and it's $5 million, let's say, and the funding is 2.3. At that point, I can ask them to reduce their scope before we sign, or potentially come back to this group and say, this is, the bids came in way high, right? What do we want to do here? Do we want to parse it out? Do we want to seek more funding? I'm really looking forward to that grant match piece to supplement. So that's the plan.
Okay. Else? Okay. Last call on the RFP.
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's too bad the 2-year term is ending here, because I'm very curious to see what ends up with this here. We'll see.
I will email all of you. If you choose not to sit on the committee next time around, I will make sure you all get an update. It'll be plastered all over our social media. Everyone will know. It'll be impossible to miss it, Doug, I promise.
That would be fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Yes. All right, there's nothing further for the RFP. We can move on to 3.2 Beaver feeding program update.
Yes, so Chad was supposed to be here today to speak to that, but we've reached out to the individual who is covering for Laura Trout. So Laura Trout works the mill, and she used to be the biologist that would help us with our beaver feeding program. Two things that I wanted to give an update on. We're coming to the end of our agreement with the mill. And so I know Beth and Chad had a conversation around, is that something that a community group could take over? So we're working to discuss that with the mill. Of course, the mill has always participated in the boardwalk. They funded it in the past. So I'm not sure where their level of participation is at this point, with continuing to provide us the wood and things like that. So we're working through that. And then just a kind of sidebar piece of that, we're working with Emily, is the lady's name that's replacing Laura right now, because we have a tourism group from Brazil who's interested in learning about the beavers and the boardwalk. So they're coming next week. So we're hoping to, they wanted to discuss the beaver feeding program. So we're going to have her out to speak a little bit on that, and what's been done to date. And they just kind of also want to know like the history of those beavers and, you know, how they interact with our community and that kind of thing. So that's the update I have there. So the next group will see kind of the new agreement, if the mill still wants to participate. Otherwise, this group will be tasked with figuring out how we want to move beaver feeding forward in the future.
Just before I go to the floor, sorry, did you say that the mill is still doing it this year?
They weren't doing it this year.
No, they've done nothing.
Oh,
Well,
okay,
one of our whiskey jacks is just volunteering to do it on his own with help with the other whiskey jacks. There's not been Fox Creek, nobody showed up.
because
The only, well, maybe if they have done one load, but
yeah,
I know our people from Whiskey Jacks have done 3 loads, like they just started September 2nd. That's, if you would normally it'd start right at the end in August.
yeah, and that's what Beth and I had a side conversation at the engagement session where that was kind of brought to my attention.
Yeah.
So that really triggered us to be having that conversation with them about the agreement.
Because they all, Fox Creek always came late, like the end of September, even October, which is way too late. Like they've got 5 kids, 1 left over from last year and 2 adults. So that's a lot of winter food cash to get going,
And
which they're building it up nice. You could see that, eh? But did Emily say that they've done anything this year?
I haven't seen anything from her. It was just Chad dealing with her. But I think that's the purpose of like, do they still want to participate? And if so, I want something like you said, that's informed, right? And that is like a regular schedule, because
Yeah.
it's also important that we communicate that out to the public, like when it's happening, because we've had a couple instances, right, where people call into bylaw because there's a truck backing up and they're dumping all this stuff in the lake, right? And they don't know why that's happening. So
And-
definitely some room for improvement, and we're looking to shore that up
Yeah,
for next season.
yeah, because I thought that had been done a few years ago where West Fraser gave specific instruction to Fox Creek, and I don't think it's Fox Creek's. I'm not blaming anything
Yeah.
yet, but it's just not getting right through
Mhm.
something that. And then this year, yeah, one of our members, he just said, I'm just doing this. And he tries to pick a time when there's very little people and everything, but still, yeah. So as far as I know, he's taken 3 loads, maybe 4 by now. But as far as I know, no one else has done anything, but they're June, like, it's amazing when you go down and being paid and people are standing around and it's magic really, and the little. And then they start with the leaves on, the little ones are in, chewing with their little feet and everything, and then away they go with the branch and. It's pretty special experience being, especially right in town like it's amazing. And then people will sit on the outdoor classroom because they swim right by them, and watch them going up and down the channel there to the lake and then back to the pond. I was just out the other night and they're just bringing mud up from the bottom of the pond and preparing all on top of the lodge too. It's amazing actually. They're amazing animals. Yeah. So, but yeah, okay, so it'll be interesting to know. Because we're just doing it unofficially. Yeah, but nothing would be happening if we weren't, like some of our members were just deciding to do it, so. And these are people know what they're doing too, there's no concern from that. point in the community.
Right, Doug, any comment or question?
Yeah, is the beaver, is it important for their survival of the family that's there now, or is it something for tourism community?
Well, it was it was started for a couple of reasons. One, so that they wouldn't cut down everybody's trees on all their lawns all around it. So that's, they
Okay.
still do a certain amount of that, but that was part of it, so that you wouldn't have to worry about them.
Sorry, Beth.
Sorry, I just want to let you guys online know that I think IT kicked me off of having a pro Zoom account. And now we're on a timer, so we have 6 minutes left, so if you guys get kicked out, I will email you a new link. Okay,
Okay, sure.
alright,
Yeah.
and then I'll
Oh,
talk
okay.
to IT about it tomorrow.
Okay, so the one was like, we've got an unusual situation here in terms of beaver dams. Like normally beavers would make a dam, chew everything all around and eventually move on because there's no food. But because we have sort of this, the Happy Creek comes through, and then when the water gets higher, it flows back through Maxwell Lake and out the other side. It's a really kind of an interesting water management system that is a little bit different than a lot of beaver ponds. So you have sort of a potential for a perpetual beaver dam.
Oh,
And the other part is for an interpretation, not so much tourism, but an interpretation opportunity for people to appreciate and understand beavers. But there is opportunity there for some really nice interpretive programming as well. Because
okay, no,
every time I'm down there, people just, you tell them the simplest things and they go, oh, we didn't know that, about beavers. So, yeah.
no, that's interesting. Thanks for that. I didn't realize about that context. So it's important because we're essentially bribing the beavers to keep the status quo and not eat all the trees elsewhere, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to about why it was started and why it's continuing?
With respect to pretty much Beth has covered it. I remember in 2016, like town staff had to go out and like fetch it like deep in the bush, because they had started to eat everything that was sort of native to them in that area. They will move on, like Beth said, so yes, we bribe them, you're right.
Okay,
Well, given that the beavers are, a fairly important highlight of the whole thing, I think that's a reasonable thing to do, stay here, attract tourism.
you even do the goose boardwalk.
We don't know.
It could be too.
Any other comments, questions from the committee?
Just out of interest, we've identified the first wood duck on Maxwell Lake. Beautiful thing. Yeah, we're updating the bird list. So it's quite bad to add quite a few birds.
If there is sorry, go ahead, Doug.
Well, so just to kind of finish the discussion on that, though, it sounded like there was a problem with the beaver feeding, that we don't have the same resources that have been there in the past. Is that correct? Or did I misunderstand?
Heather?
So there reports from the Whiskey Jack, for those that are there a lot, right up at the boardwalk, that they haven't seen. So the town entered into an agreement where West Fraser would bring us the wood and get it dropped off for the beavers. However, there's reports that hasn't been happening as early as it needs to or as frequently. There is sort of an agreement in place with West Fraser for that, which is due for renewal. So what we were just discussing was just an update that's on my list of things to do to get that sorted for next year, and whether we wanted to continue with West Fraser, whether they're still interested. And then also Beth has said that the Whiskey Jacks have experience with that and have been doing a couple loads this year. And so potentially there's the opportunity to work with a group such as that, as opposed to the mill or in conjunction with the mill.
Okay, because I honestly put that at the back of my mind. I didn't really think too much about it, but I think Beth's explanation is a very interesting way of putting it. This actually sounds like a fairly important task that I hate to see kind of missed or something like that if somebody is not fulfilling their agreement or something like that.
How's that going to be brought to this group in the future, and And the group's feedback on how that's gonna be structured and expectations and obligations on the, whatever party takes it on.
Yeah, so for starters, I have not been able to locate this written agreement. There's emails that have gone back and forth, but those kinds of key performance indicators, like when, how much, how frequently, who is doing it, what kind of environmental considerations need to be made when you're dropping that off, right? Don't drive over all the willows on your way. So I think it's very much like we bring a drafted agreement to the table, we discuss it, we get input as to how frequently this should happen, and we take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to go about it, to have an actual formalized written agreement with timelines and obligations, expectations.
And then are we satisfied with what's being done for this year, given that, you know, it's already almost winter?
So from our perspective at the town, yes, Beth has filled me in that, like I said, people from Whiskey Jacks have been dumping off extra. And that they know what they're doing, and Beth's sitting here tonight saying that, you know, they're down there taking the little twigs and they're building with the mud, so I think they're happy right now, but I think the largest concern is that it should have been sooner, like in the summer as opposed to into fall. Especially in a year, I can imagine if we were to get an early freeze up, that'd be a big problem for the beavers, yeah.
Okay.
So do we think everything's okay then for this?
Yeah, so like I said, Chad's been corresponding, he's just away right now, so when he gets back, I'm gonna connect. Yeah.
Right. Anything else?